And welcome, one and all, to our final football night shift of 2022. I am Bryson Turner, and with me, he goes by many names, but I just prefer to call him by his given name, Andrew Glukov. And we come to you after I would argue, a bitter end to UCF's final season in the American as they fall in the Military Bowl against Duke 30-13 in Annapolis, Maryland. I mean, you lose to Navy earlier in the season, and now you lose in Navy Stadium for the second year in a row, mind you. I've seen the conversation all over Twitter. There's a lot to discuss. But first, I'll go to you, Drew. What were your thoughts as the clock wound down?
Well, it just shows how far this program still needs to go if they want to be competitive in the Big 12. That's one of the benefits of having a bowl game. It's a glorified exhibition game, but you get the extra practices and you really get to gauge where you're at. And we got to see that UCF needs work going into the Big 12 next year.
Well, I want to start with a little bit of a positive note. Isaiah Bowser, he managed to get UCF's lone 2 touchdowns today, which propelled him to 16 touchdowns for his UCF career, which puts him in all alone in second place for the most rushing touchdowns by a night in a single season in program history. I honestly feel really bad for Bowser because with the types of numbers he's been running, in my opinion, he was the only offensive player that I think had the resemblance of a good game, at least with the way that he was used. I mean, he ran 11 times for 39 yards, but the Bowser Cat seemed to work as always. And I think that this game, to me, is sort of highlights how I feel like this team will miss Bowser since this was his 5th year and he will move on to other things afterwards. What would you say, Drew?
Well, even more so than his running abilities, his blocking ability. I think that's where UCF is going to really miss him because he's the best blocking running back on this team. And this was a game where the offensive line just was really ineffective. They created zero faith in creating and maintaining a pocket, which left John Rice Plumlee running places he really shouldn't have been. He should have stayed in the pocket, stepped up, and thrown the ball. But he had no faith in the pocket. And looking at that big fail in 4th and long, I don't blame him. The offensive line was terrible, just absolutely terrible. And again, it goes back to this gives an opportunity to see what needs to be worked on, and that's definitely the area that needs the most work. They're hitting the portal, they're recruiting young freshmen. But you got to do more. You basically have to overhaul this entire unit. It was massively ineffective. It made the other position groups less effective. But I have to disagree with you a little bit. I think the guy who actually had the best game was Kobe Hudson. Outside of one drop, which he had back-to-back catches, he just had one bad drop, went off the field for a little bit, came back on. He was pretty solid. When the ball came to where he could catch the ball, he made plays happen. He was the most consistent guy on this offense. You talk about Bowser scoring. Well, you're running the Wildcat offense from 1 to 2 yards out. Yeah, you should be scoring the touchdowns on those kind of runs. So it kind of inflates the numbers a little bit. But throughout the rest of the outside of the red zone, wasn't there all that much. But Kobe Hudson was as consistent as can be. 5 catches, team leading 63 yards. In fact, he was game leading in reception yards in a game where receiving yards were a premium. They were hard to find because neither quarterback had a very spectacular day in the air.
It's true. I mean, it's funny because I think if I remember right, Duke had the advantage passing earlier in the game, but as we look at these final game stats here, John Rice Plumlee actually ended up edging out Riley Leonard for the most passing yards on the night, with JRP getting 182 yards on 21 completed passes, while Riley Leonard had 173 passing yards on 19. completed passes. I'm looking now through to see if we can get some quarter cues. Here we go. So UCF's passing yards here.
Well, that was the first half. If you go to the fourth quarter,
Half,
if you go down to the fourth quarter, and it was something that I wanted to highlight is the fact that it was a very one-sided game in the fourth quarter. Even the announcers have mentioned at different points, don't let the score fool you. The game was closer than the points showed. It really was. You had a couple of key mistakes. You had the fumble by Plumlee and a couple of ill-timed penalties. That was the big difference between one and the other. Third down conversion was the other X factor in this one, which is the defense could not get Duke off the field consistently enough, allowed drives to continue. And they were able to get points on those drives. But you look at the fourth quarter, that interception that Plumlee threw, that's garbage time. It basically meant nothing to this game. But,
yes.
you look at, they were dominant. The defense was dominant in that fourth quarter. In fact, the defense got better as the game wore on. And I think part of that is, and I was going to highlight it in my article, Duke lost no players to the portal. None. UCF lost 3 starters alone to the portal, yet alone more depth. So you have a lot of young guys, players who are still kind of feeling it out, that are still learning the game, coming in, starting or playing meaningful minutes. And as the game wore on, they got more and more comfortable, especially on defense. And you're seeing that result. I mean, the Henderson, Jakari and Damari Henderson, as the game wore on, they made some meaningful plays. Jakari Henderson almost had an interception. He had one of the best tackles we saw during the game, which was a really tough open field tackle. That's your future. And that's one of the benefits of the bowl game is the future is now. And you see some of those guys start getting some meaningful action in a situation where, unlike the conference championship, where I would say your foot's fully on the throttle. You look at these bowl games, and with players leaving for the draft, leaving for the portal, coming in, coming out, coaches leaving, the foot is not necessarily fully on the throttle because it can't. They don't have all their horses in place. So you get a different kind of vibe in a bowl game versus a regular season game like the conference championship. So this offered an opportunity for some of these younger players to play more meaningful minutes. I mean, depth was definitely a concern, and look at the cornerback situation. There was only 3 corners in the 2 deep that was released by the team earlier this week. Good thing the Knights avoided injury, or else we'd be a little bit concerned. But that just shows that the end of the season, you have that thinness in the depth because of players leaving, but that also allows those bottom players to get meaningful playing time. And granted, didn't really affect UCF this year, the blanket one-time waiver for the redshirt rules in the bowl season, I could see that becoming more of a thing because of all these other changes that we've seen with roster personnel.
That is true. That was a very interesting notion. And I did mention that when we had our roundtable article that went up a little while ago. I remember mentioning how Tommy Castellanos, if his red shirt weren't burnt already, could have really used this to have some playing time if they needed it. We ended up not seeing him, of course. But yeah, Jakari and Damari Henderson, I really did like what I saw out of some of these younger players on defense. But another player that ended up, I think, getting in more of a spotlight because of the transfer portal entrance was Xavier Townsend, who led the team with 7 receptions. He caught all 7 of his targets. He only went for 25 yards and he didn't score, but I was intrigued by how much they were trying to incorporate Townsend into the offense. It just didn't exactly seem to work out for him.
Well, I mean, nothing worked out. Nothing was able to develop much consistency, and offense, defense, consistency was something that was inconsistent. And the only thing consistent about the game was the fact that it was inconsistent. So it's really difficult for stuff to kind of gel when you're not when you can't have the faith that you need to, because you got to have faith in your teammates, and if it's not there, you're not going to be able to build any form of consistent gameplay.
So let's see. Oh, well, one other thing I think we should mention. I mentioned earlier that Isaiah Bowser managed to make his way to top to be all alone in second place for the most rushing touchdowns in a season. Another night that managed to make his way into UCF's history books is Jason Johnson. He ended up finishing his night with 7 tackles, 4 of them solos. I saw a couple of really good plays out of him that I remember distinctly. I remember early in the game where Johnson managed to stop a Duke runner for a short gain. But adding to his 119 tackles from coming into this game, he now puts himself into the top 10 all time for most UCF tackles in a season. He puts himself at 8th place ahead of Kamal Ishmael. He is the first person since Ishmael to get into this top 10 list. He mentioned that he hasn't made a decision about his future yet. What do you think that says in terms of how big Jason Johnson has been for this team and the implications of his upcoming decision if he wants to come back next season?
Well, I mean, when you're the team leader in a stat like tackles, I mean, you don't want him to leave. You need that. You've already lost, Jeremiah Jean-Baptiste. You really can't afford to lose another linebacker like him, especially when it's not a required loss like going to, like graduating.
All right. Well, all right. You are watching Night Shift here on the Black and Gold Banneret. UCF has fallen in the Military Bowl to Duke 30-13, and we are now bringing in live from Edition Financial Arena because he's covering the UCF versus Wichita State basketball game later today. It is student of the game Kyle Nash. Kyle, how was your drive over to campus, and just what were your thoughts on today's game?
I mean, well, first of all, listen, I don't think anything happened in this game that was really surprising beyond the turnovers, right, gentlemen? At the end of the day, John Rice had a turnover because of his ball security habits not being as good as they need to be. And let's be honest, Duke escaped a couple of moments where they could have had a turnover, but somebody was just stepped out of bounds at the wrong time where the ball falls out. At the end of the day, both teams having more rushing yards than passing yards, not a surprise. And what took place in the trenches between the teams, not a...
Uh-oh. Looks like we might be having
coming. So, yeah, the defensive backs were their own issue. I feel like they overcame a lot of...
Looks like Kyle is having some technical difficulties in Edition Financial Arena. I always said that the bounce house is where Wi-Fi goes to die, but sometimes that kind of happens in Edition Financial Arena as well. You there, Kyle?
Sports!
Yeah. So, I mean, the point I just want to make...
And there it is. All right, we'll come back to Kyle later to see if he can see if he can get to a place where he won't be interrupted.
That's deserving of the cake. At least you tried. At least we tried.
We tried. We apologize for that.
Sorry, Kyle.
Jessica Sheldon said, "Hi, this game made me sick." It's funny when I was tweeting during this game and UCF managed to get this game to within 10 points and got that touchdown right then. Between then and the 2-point conversion, I felt like Hawkeye in Avengers Endgame where I was thinking his team like, don't give me hope. You're giving me hope, and I don't know if I want it or not. And lo and behold, it ended up being crushed not only by the failed 2-point conversion, though you could probably come back from that, but also from the ensuing drive and the failed fourth down throw there. And I know we had Kyle on, and I wanted to ask him about this, and hopefully we'll get him on to ask him about this. But Drew, I want to get your thoughts on this first and foremost. The offensive line. We've been talking about them for a lot of the season. I feel like that unit has kind of been this team's bugaboo a little bit for the entire season, and felt like that's kind of what it boiled down to today.
Well, that was definitely the primary culprit. I mean, people are going to say, "Oh, it's the quarterback." No. The quarterback made some mistakes on his own, such as fumbling the ball, picking some bad lanes. But the truth is, the offensive line made the running game pretty ineffective. It made the ability to set up the passing game ineffective. A bad line will take down even the best of players. So when you look at because fans are going to blame someone, they're going to point fingers. But let's be honest. Duke's not a bad team. They really aren't. I mean, there's a reason why Mike Elko's winning Coach of the Year awards. He did a really good job with this team. It's not bad. So let's give them some credit. They game planned well. They executed really well. Their strength was the running game. Took advantage of UCF's lack of depth and playmakers on the defensive side of the ball. And they knew that UCF's offensive line has been their Achilles heel all year, and took advantage of it. I think Duke handled it well, and I think we need to realize that it's not just a one person thing. It's a whole slew of problems, and it's going to take some time to fix that. Your offensive line is only as strong as your weakest player, so you've got work to do.
You mentioned the quarterback. I found this tweet from @Ryan_DPenteam on Twitter that said, "I find the QB discourse around UCF to largely uninformed and uninteresting. Was JRP very good? Nope. Did they have a very good QB on the roster? Also no. People are clamoring for a person that didn't exist." Honestly, that seems like I don't know if that's just college football in a nutshell, if it's just a unique UCF fan base problem. But I think that's kind of been this entire season. People were clamoring for a quarterback that like they projected onto Mikey Keene with the improvement, and Mikey Keene did a good job. And JRP, like both JRP and Mikey Keene have had their talents, but it just seems like it wasn't all the way there. And there were some times that JRP made some great throws, like that one to Javon Baker, and that run, of course, on that trickeration play. But then you also have the duds, like on the 4th and short, where he threw it to Xavier Townsend, and it was short of the first down when he could have run the ball.
Well, to say they were good is definitely no. I don't think either quarterback was really all that good. In most cases, it was the receivers bailing them out. Take what you talked about, the Javon Baker catch today. Baker bailed him out. That was an underthrown ball that Baker sealed off really well and was able to make the catch. That's on the receiver. This reminds me of when Joe Flacco and the Baltimore Ravens were going through the NFL playoffs a number of years ago. And, Joe Flacco's elite. No, his receivers kept bailing him out with killer plays. That's the same thing here. These UCF had some elite receivers between Baker, Hudson, and O'Keefe making a lot of plays. We talked about, you hear about the whole thing. Mikey Keene won the game at USF. No, the receivers won that on that final drive. Say what you want. Those were not easy catches. That's on the receiver. Now you take it what it is. Sure, he got the ball in a place with either one guy or no guy was going to catch it. But boy, they had to make highlight reel catches to make it. No, UCF doesn't have a good quarterback in 2022. That was the problem. Now, as we know, things change from season to season. Players develop, they get better. New players come in. The situation completely can flip on a moment's notice. 2016 to 17, Mackenzie Milton, great example. Quarterback who struggled his freshman year, found it, got the development, the light bulb went off, became a great quarterback his sophomore year. We don't know what the offseason holds. And while Mackenzie Milton is kind of like an exception to the rule, because I mean, that's a huge jump. But we don't know what the future holds. How's the offseason program going to work out? How's spring ball going to work out? How are the new players coming in going to push the players that are currently in? You know, UCF's got Timmy McLean, who's going to be eligible next year. They got Tommy Risk, who's coming in from, or Dylan Risk, sorry, coming in through high school. Tommy Castellanos is going to have some more, experience under his belt, studying film, allowing the game to slow down, let his own maturity of his own personal development help him grow as a football player. It's hard for freshmen to step in and do a great job. It's hard. It doesn't happen very often. Mikey Keene last year did an admirable job being a game manager, and he had great talent around him to make it happen. But it doesn't magically happen, and it's not all in one person. So the fact that UCF had these great receivers, and losing Ryan O'Keefe hurts a lot. However, we saw flashes of what Xavier Townsend can be. He's got some room to grow, as we saw. Needs to work on his cuts and his angles because he kept falling over. That takes time. That takes development. That takes working with the coaches, analyzing the film, doing the off-season program, working to get bigger and stronger and faster. It'll happen. You've got, Javon Baker and Kobe Hudson, great receivers coming back. Alec Holler coming back. You have a lot of talent in the room. Now it's about taking it from point A to point B. But to blame it all on one guy, or even to say that, yeah, we had a good quarterback, and he played or he didn't play or whatever. Nah, UCF did not have a good quarterback on this team this year. Otherwise, we'd be having a very different conversation about where UCF is at the end of the season.
All right, I want to bring in Kyle. Let's do a take two on this. Let's see how
Welcome back,
Kyle.
It feels like 3 takes with Drew saying the same thing over and over again, and now another 30-minute long soliloquy of the same. But listen, I joke, but he's absolutely right. The focus being on the quarterback, I think uninformed was what you read from the commenter, Bryson. And for a minute there, I thought that was a burner account I had made. It's the point we had made here on the Black and Gold Banneret podcast throughout the entire year. It wasn't just one facet of the game where the Knights were beaten today. And again, as I brought up in my first effort, was there were some things that didn't go UCF's way over and above everything else. This game went exactly as we said it would on last week's Black and Gold Banneret podcast. That's not a question to me. But, I think what's most compelling for this particular game is kind of the strain of running the ball with Isaiah Bowser. I didn't see a huge amount of carries, but I feel like there could have been more. I felt like when the attack took place with the faster runner, then you change gears and kind of come with that number 2 punch. Bowser was successful. Now, the defense probably will be there's a whole lot of 3rd and longs that also took place. You're obviously not running Bowser on a 3rd and 19. I get that. But there's a lot of situations where I really feel like maybe he should have been the leading force. He gets a cloud of dust going. He gets the defense kind of muddled in, shortens their splits watching for him, and that's when JRP has a shot at the lottery ticket. Because here's what it is on the offense, gentlemen. Gus Malzahn has said many times that it's really all about those big plays, right? He's trying to get that lottery ticket to get his chance to get his group in short yardage to then use those reliable pieces he has. We didn't have any jackpots hit by this offense today, except for maybe one long pass, perhaps. And heck, when you're a receiver who's supposed to be making a difference in Javon Baker's being called out by the commentators for, and I quote, just chilling, that's not a great sign either.
Kyle, I also wanted to get your input on, because I asked Drew about this earlier, and I wanted to get your input as well. The O-line. You've been talking about this unit for the entire season. You're like the O-line expert on the Black and Gold Banneret crew. People have been talking a lot about this O-line. So, what are your thoughts?
I mean, it's what exactly we said last week. I mean, I've beaten this horse, Bryson. You've been on the show, and those who have been listening have been on it. But for those who haven't heard it, this is the game where we have a Power Five group against a team that doesn't have a Power Five offensive line yet. Granted, there's an Alabama transfer that looks very interesting coming in on the offensive line. You know, everybody talks about Walker coming in as a big recruit on the defensive line. Those are all wonderful things. But for today, they were absolutely not a factor. And there were a lot of times, too, where there was just some really good defensive play calls. Let's give Mike Elko and his staff a little bit of credit. Mike Elko and his group had a lot of discipline up front, and they dared to do UCF to do stuff that they weren't comfortable with. And they were never made to pay for overcommitting to a particular strategy on defense, right? There were a lot of times I feel like they would send just an extra man. I feel like we saw a lot more spread in the offense this week than usual. Drew, you can correct me if you think I'm wrong on that. But I felt like there was a lot more of that than usual.
Well, I think part of that was also the way the game kind of dictated.
We saw it early too, but you're right there as well.
Yeah, I mean, early on, you saw it to kind of spread style. They passed early. They actually did not commit to the run for a little bit into the game. More longer than you would think they would have. I would have figured they would have tapped the running game a little bit more earlier than they did. But you're right. They definitely played a lot looser on offense, a lot more spread out on their formations. On the flip side, on the defensive side, we also saw some wrinkles that we hadn't seen much in, especially
on the flip side. Drew was leaving us in suspense.
Yeah, on the defensive side, the backfield, you got some bump coverage coming up on the line. You didn't see that all year outside of a short blip against Cincinnati. So we're seeing some changes, but I think the bowl season is where you start to see where the future. The future is now. You're starting to see shades of what is to come, getting away of what was.
So, Drew, Kyle, I know you're saying it's being a dead horse, but I feel like that being a dead horse is necessary when the horse hasn't necessarily learned its lesson yet, or it just
it's dead.
It's dead. Yeah,
it's not gonna. It's not coming back.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. That's not to say, by the way, because you are right. Because this does show the preview of what was. We mentioned Xavier Townsend earlier, where he's shown flashes, but just like we said with Mikey Keene last year, he's a true freshman, and he's going to make some true freshman mistakes, like say not making sure he was across the first down marker on a fourth down throw. So, but he did catch all of his targets, and that's a start. You mentioned Kobe Hudson, RJ Harvey. He also got his time to shine. Now that I want to talk about actually the future of the rushing game, because we saw Johnny Richardson getting some time, and I almost thought that they were going to use him in kind of a Ryan O'Keefe type role, considering that he and O'Keefe were both speedsters, but he only ended up having three carries for 30 yards. I mean, he managed to get some yardage on the plays that he had, but now that Isaiah Bowser is graduating, where does that leave the rushing attack, where we have Johnny Richardson and RJ Harvey, who seem to have more speedstery aspects to them, and then of course there's Jordan McDonald. So where does this leave the running attack, which I would argue has been the UCF's, I think, primary offensive weapon that worked the most this season?
I mean, I'd hate to give the boring answer, but they're just fine. Like, I don't really think this is a group I'm concerned about. And really, when you look through Gus's arrival early to the campus, a lot of the boobs up front were running back prospects, right, on the offensive side. And moreover, he had a lot of stuff going in. I mean, RJ Harvey, I don't remember if he was a Gus product or not, but he did comeback player of the year, certainly, for this squad. There's no question. I don't really see the running backs being an area of focus where there's going to be a struggle. They got a lot there now. Sure, Bowser's leaving, but they have a lot of other pieces. Maybe they can't be as much of a utility back as Bowser can, which is going to get him into an NFL camp. I don't know that he makes a roster, but I feel confident he's going to get a phone call somewhere undrafted. But at the end of the day, for me, guys, I got to tell you, I don't think UCF's running back room's the problem here.
In that case, what would you say? Is it the O-line, Kyle? Is that the one?
Yes. We're back to that again. Right, and again, they've gotten a couple commits. They've gotten a transfer in, from Alabama. But the two, I should say, freshmen they have coming in are both under 300 pounds. That's not going to cut the mustard into Power 5, right? These are guys that need to get bulked up and built up quickly, and that's not something you get immediately. Listen, Knight fans need to understand that this Duke game is going to be representative of a lot of games they play when they battle Power 5 opponents, particularly the Big 12, a group which, by the way, typically has bigger guys in the trenches than some of these ACC teams do, right? So I say all that to say, life next year, you could be a 7-6 team that's barely bowl eligible. But hey, that's enough to get Oklahoma here in Orlando.
Of all the times that Kyle could have frozen, and it's there.
Where did you lose me there, Bryson?
Right when you were saying Orlando.
But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, with that record, you can play a bowl game in Orlando. Just ask Oklahoma, who's going to be playing tomorrow night.
Now, notice he did not ask me that question because he wasn't going to like the answer. Because it would have been full of snark.
I know we talked about the Knights. I want to just hit it real quick of what Duke did really well. One thing I noticed that Duke did really well early on that helped them build that lead and get it to 23-7 was I noticed that they managed to get the big plays on the Riley Leonard, of course, being the dual quarterback that he is. The quarterbacks just seem to have to be a bit of an Achilles heel for this defense. But you also have, I heard Duquez Moore's name called out a lot. I mean, the Duke's rushers managed to get more yards on them than with 177 to 128. They just seem to really get through the defensive line, or at least broke out for those big plays much more often. So what do you think, how much would you say attribute it to the UCF defense just not being on all cylinders, and how much would you say Duke's offense is just good?
Well, I guess I'll go first. Duke played their game. They didn't lose anybody. They played their game that they played all year. They have a dual threat quarterback, which UCF has a historical problem with. Riley Leonard played a fantastic game. This is what he does, and he's good at it. They show the fact that he generates touchdowns. He moves the ball, and this was not a flashy game.
No.
Both defenses did a really good job of holding together against offenses that could explode. So I think Duke played exactly as they were supposed to. We saw the lack of depth that came as a result of the players lost through graduation, through the portal, and through injury. And they talked about Morris Brash not playing. That's a huge piece right there on your defensive line. They don't have a player that even comes close to replicating him. You have Josh Selskar on the other side, but then you can't replicate Morris Brash on the other side. So it's not like when Jeremiah Jean-Baptiste left and Walter Yates slid in. And Yates is a good player. He's not as good, but he's not a bad player. You have a major drop off from Morris Brash not playing because of the shoulder injury. So UCF had a lot of pieces missing, and it hurt them in the early half of the game. It took a lot of those younger guys who were getting that meaningful time a while to really get their feet under them, get their confidence, and by the fourth quarter, you saw it in full force. They shut them down. They had, less than 20 yards of offense in the fourth quarter, Duke? So, you're seeing, the development there, but you still have 3 quarters of game, and UCF got thrown around.
Absolutely, Drew. And listen, we knew Duke was probably going to try to run the ball often to set up Leonard to hit the ball down the field in the air game. But once you see number 33 in a sling and that big body's out of the way, you're going to test it because you already know Jeremiah Jean-Baptiste isn't a factor. You're now down to their third guy in that spot in that part of the defense. Granted, I know they don't play the exact same position, Drew, but I believe they're on the same side. I'm attacking that first just to see what's up, regardless of what I have scripted. I might do the same run. I'm just doing it to the other side now. The punchline's this, my man. You point out a lot of good stuff, and hey, listen, here's an upgrade for that should make things happy for UCF fans out there. As they transition to Power 5 in the Big 12, you'll get more quarterback prospects like Leonard for the Blue Devils who can throw the ball about as well as he can run it. You're not going to get a guy who's 4'2", who's dependent entirely on his legs. And listen, I'm a guy who has been relatively protective, I should say, for lack of a better word, for John Rice Plumlee. But if you remember in the preseason, hey, I want to see him returning bunt, not playing quarterback, right? You know, that being said, I'm still curious to see what an offseason will do for JRP. And where UCF fans need to uplift is the chances of getting a quarterback that can do both things is slightly higher in the Big 12.
Well, yeah, you're gonna get a better chance of getting better prospects. But remember, Rome wasn't built in a day.
Sure.
Fans are gonna have to have some tempered expectations here because they're not gonna win 11, 12 games in the Big 12 next year. This team is 6, maybe 7 wins. I mean, that's a very realistic possibility. They may even end up with 5 wins.
If this is an 8th straight year coming up, Drew, where UCF is bowl eligible, that should be seen as a very healthy introduction into the conference.
Yeah, just look at TCU's development, over the years. It took some time. It took some lumps. So, they're the blueprint. You're in a football hotbed like Florida. It's actually easier now to build a roster because you can hot plug players in through the portal, whereas in yesteryear it was much more difficult. So it's going to take time, and we have to have that tempered expectation that, we're going to take some lumps. We're going to see this team get knocked down a lot. And a winning record may not happen out of the gate. But, the sun will come up tomorrow, and they'll get there. We just have to be patient as they build towards it.
Did you really just go Annie on me, Drew?
Heck yeah.
One thing that I will say is I forgot that we didn't mention this earlier, but I think one of the biggest stats in this game when we look back on this is the sack count. JRP was sacked 6 times today. I know you mentioned the O-line, but I mean, with how elusive JRP can be, I feel like there were at least a couple of sacks, including that last one, where I feel like he might have been able to evade them if he kind of saw it around him. You know what I mean?
Well, he could have thrown the ball away.
That too, yeah. Some of it was bad reads by JRP. I'll grant that. Some of it was Duke simply sending more guys than UCF had up front. Good coaches find opportunities to do that to where no matter how good your O-line is. Bryson Turner, here is the parable for every offensive lineman that you need to learn immediately if you're going to analyze it, my guy. Who is the most dangerous pass rusher? Nope, you're looking at stats. You got it wrong. The guy who isn't blocked.
It's a trick question, my friend.
It's a parable, not a statistic, my guy.
Yeah, and that's where the key with blitzing is. Look at that third down play when Duke was deep in their territory. That Jason Johnson blitzed up the middle, made a great replay of it, blocked the passing lane, and the ball was thrown into the dirt, basically. If you throw too many guys in there that you can compared to what you can block, you're going to make results. That's where the value of a blocking running back comes into play because they can help with that. The other thing is, and again, stats won't necessarily tell you this, it's about outside containment and making sure that a speedster like JRP cannot get beyond your grasp. So on more often than not, when he tried to run outside, he ran into trouble and had to either come back inside or run out of real estate. That's good outside containment, which is done by your defensive ends or outside linebackers, depending on what your coverage scheme is. Those ends did a fantastic job for Duke. They made Plumlee's life absolutely miserable because the interior linemen couldn't hold the blocks very long. So those outside guys did cause a number of sacks, even though the stats may not reflect it.
And we observed that in the statistics leading into the game, though, Drew, that those ends were going to be a problem. I think Bryson even alluded to it as well. But their discipline in keeping Plumlee contained, when he was undisciplined, they ate. We mentioned him running out of the pocket. That was at least one sack. And heck, there were even times I have never seen Isaiah Bowser get overwhelmed on the way he did on one particular play. But sure enough, from the right side, they managed to overwhelm Isaiah Bowser. Bowser actually put the defender back behind Plumlee, but Plumlee was still out of control. So it was just a tough situation overall. And listen, you had said on the Black and Gold Banneret podcast that that defensive front was going to be a problem.
Indeed. Drew has this parable of mention that if a secondary player is leading the team in tackles, you've got an issue. Kobe Perry.
Yes, Drew developed that parable on my show back when it was in its first run. So yeah, I'm there with him.
Right. That said, though, Kobe Perry, I mean, I don't know. I noticed some discussion on Twitter early in the game where Kobe Perry was really got off to an aggressive start in this matchup. I mean, with how depleted this UCF secondary was, Kobe Perry really stepped up today. I think I saw one guy say my game against England.
Well, I'll put it this way. Kobe Perry was a presence. I'm with you. But as UCF continues to build the defensive front, I'll put it this way. Drew has made the case, and it's not a bad one, that Devontae Brown is the biggest missing piece, the biggest transfer portal loss, right? And from a capacity standpoint, he isn't wrong. But tonight, being without Jeremiah Jean-Baptiste, who's gone to Ole Miss, paired with Trayvon Morris-Brash, and I think we touched on this, I think that led to more of a deficit up front than there normally would have been, and that's where we're talking about some of the weakness in the pass rush, right? At the end of the day, this is a group that has struggled to get home in a lot of cases throughout the year. I think the most indicted example would be ECU, right? We're still waiting on that turnover that Eric Lopez promised me months ago from Holton Ahlers, and instead he's over here blasting Coastal Carolina out of the water in his bowl game, right? But, I'll put it this way. The defensive front on the line still looks to be pretty solid. The linebackers, and I think Coach said it earlier this week, or was it last week, whenever we had the early signing day conversation with him, that linebacker is right back where it started in a big area of focus for UCF.
Yeah, and the big question is Jason Johnson coming back? Because if he's gone, then you go right back to the drawing board and start from scratch. But if he comes back, you at least have something to work with. Because that makes
he would be a tough loss.
Tackling machine.
Well, speaking of the pass rush, Mr. Hampton 913 actually talked about this. Do we think the pass rush will see a significant improvement next year? I didn't realize we only had 22 sacks all year, which is towards the bottom of the FBS. I want to tack on something else to this a little bit, because one other thing that this defense did not have was turnovers. Because the turnover margin on this team was not very good. UCF almost had a turnover there. Like, I thought that we could have gotten some momentum with that Brandon Adams strip, which, by the way, was an amazing play on Brandon Adams' part. It's just unfortunate that the Duke runner stepped out of bounds before he did it, and ended up robbing UCF a chance to build some more momentum there. But what do you think that we could see some improvement in those two with the pass rush next season?
Well, we haven't enough time to see that yet. Addison Williams, when he was brought in, was 9 days away from coaching his first football game for UCF as the defensive coordinator. So we weren't going to see any wholesale changes. How do I know that? He told me when he was introduced. So I'll say all that to say this, guys. Next year, if you're a UCF fan that's trying to see those turnover numbers go up, you're going to want to see more aggressive work up front. Okay, and I think a lot of the reason you saw guys sitting back was to account for what was going on up front with the pass rush. The linebackers were learning, players were developing. And as things got right, there was never more aggressiveness put up front compared to what there was, right? We kind of touched on this too. And I really think the SMU game really had the DBs and the defense feeling themselves with how good they did when they were challenged, denying a really good passing offense, at least on paper, that didn't live up to expectation throughout the season. But nonetheless, they were incredibly dominant in that performance, and I felt like this put them in a place to continue to let that style ride. When really they needed to start trying to be at least thinking about being more aggressive on other downs. Drew, you said it best about the Tulane championship game specifically, that if you're leaving guys that much distance, 12 yards and beyond, they actually have so much room that they can adjust to where you are because they know where you are. They know you're coming. They can impose a bad angle because they have that much time to react. You don't have that if you're close together. And frankly, if you're that worried about getting beat over the top, that tells me the coordinator has concerns about the line and the front's ability to get home. But these things go hand in hand. With tight coverage, you get more time up front. But if the clock goes too long, you're worried about getting beat with a big play down the field, and it's a balance that's tough to strike. But if you're constantly sitting back, you don't have balance. You're just waiting for them to make a mistake, and maybe things will go wrong.
Right. I mean, the thing is, we haven't mentioned it. Coverage sacks, and you were kind of alluding to
Right.
it. Coverage
Yeah.
sacks. That's what that tight coverage gives you. And as you said, you line up 10, 12 yards off the ball, they can chew you up. They can pick their spots and just take care of business. We saw it tonight, getting away from that. They still drop back a lot, but they also played times where they were playing bump coverage, and you know what, they did not win in the air. The run set up the pass, and they were able to pick their spots. None of their big plays went over them. It was in front of them, and there was bad angles, which the loss of those players to the draft and to the portal played played a role in that. You were talking about losing Jeremiah and Jean Baptiste. Walter Yates had a number of times where he had the wrong angle, missed the
Right.
tackle. Jean Baptiste, a better tackler, may not have made that same mistake. So, some of these big plays were all set up by little mistakes. And the thing is, those things can be worked on and improved upon in the off season. That's why, there were some people in absolute meltdown mode. No, I don't think meltdown mode is the right thing to be right now. I think now it's the time to kind of quietly regroup and use this opportunity, install the new defense, create new habits. This is an open book. We have the ability, we as a program have the ability to write what's in there as opposed to just deal with what's told to us. So I think there's an opportunity here to take the mistakes of today back, and with the offseason program and new coaching staff in place, because new linebackers coach, new defensive coordinator. Say what Addison Williams may have moved in house, but he hasn't had a chance to install his defense.
Right.
It's that it can't be expected that in a week and change that he's going to have it done. No, little tweaks here, little tweaks here, but you're going to see the meat and potatoes come next year.
So, speaking of coaching staff, one comment I saw is one other staff change that's going to have to happen is on the offensive coordinator. UCF did not have an offensive coordinator in place for this game. Gus ended up taking those duties, and so UCF Stevie is now asking, should Gus give up play calling in 2023? And I would also like to supplement this with a tweet from @LBrannon53 where he said, Gus Malzahn is a crazy good recruiter, heck of a program builder, would love for him to be the head coach in those regards. I'm good with him having input into the offense, but would love to see a legit OC that had control of the offense and was a bit more well-rounded. Would you say that this game goes toward the case that this should happen next season?
No. No. Matter of fact, the lack of an offensive coordinator might have worked in the favor, considering if they were in a position where they were dependent on Lindsey to call plays, they'd be pretty screwed this week. Like, no. um, I'll put it this way. Some of the creative stuff that did work is a credit to why Gus is there. The big plays that did happen, despite shortcomings in the staff and the players, listen, at some point, Gus is making, what is it, making lemonade out of lemons here, okay? That's the clean version, right? So I say all the above to say, I would make the argument rather than say, oh, this was bad. Maybe UCF did as well as they did because he's pushing the envelope. What was it I heard them say about Mike Elko's reaction to coaching against Gus Malzahn again in this game? His response was, is oh crap okay? Just because you never know what you get. He's got that kind of mad scientist, fancy chef vibe to him. And other coaches are fearful of that. They're afraid of that jackpot play. Heck, Duke's defensive scheme showed that they were afraid of that jackpot play. The problem is they knew that jackpot play could only happen from John Rice Plumlee.
I'm going to play a little devil's advocate, not fully, but partially. In the case of having an offensive coordinator who takes more of a hands-on approach with the offense, allows Malzahn to work as the CEO and not have to focus too much on one area to the detriment of the other, especially with a young head coach, a young defensive coordinator like Addison Williams. I think Malzahn being able to take a step back could help the team as a whole. But that, obviously that doesn't mean he can't have, put his input and his wrinkles into the offense, because you're still going to want your scheme run, but to take that off his plate or at least share it would allow him to focus on other areas that I think could benefit from his more hands-on work.
I think he acknowledges that too, Drew. And when he was asked about it last week during the announcement of Addison Williams, where he found UCF's will to win, he addressed, somebody asked that question of him whether he is willing to give up play calling duties, and in so many words, because he kind of coach speak the answer, but in so many words the way he left it was, if the right candidate came along and he was given the chance to feel like they could really help advance the program in such a fashion, he would relinquish it. That being said, I don't think it's his first choice. And let's be real. I don't know how many offensive coordinators who want to call plays would be comfortable doing it under a guy who had literally written a book on offense. It's not like he's just going to not be involved. It's an interesting give and take concept there.
Yeah, and that's part of where, when you are interviewing your candidates, you're going to have to kind of find a happy medium, because he's not going to give it fully up. That's his bread and butter. That's what got him to the pinnacle of FBS coaching, into a national championship game, is because of his offense. So basically, the candidate's going to have to do what he wants from the offense, and they're going to have to find a certain level of synergy as far as being able to kind of share the load, because he's going to want to put his wrinkles in. He's going to want to have his input, but adulting's hard, and that we're going to have to. We're going to have to see them do that.
Adulting's hard, really? That's your take? You're not wrong.
Well, speaking of adulting, Kyle, you have another job to do tonight. You, for those that are listening to this in the future or in audio form, Kyle is currently live at Addition Financial Arena for the UCF men's basketball game against Wichita State, which is slated to start in just a little over a half an hour. So I'm sure you have to get ready for that, Kyle. First, can you tease us just a little bit about what you think we can maybe see from the team tonight, and then final thoughts on today's game and what it means?
Not too much beyond conference play. Welcome to the American for 2022-23, right, gentlemen? This particular game is going to be a good way to set the table and start having that conversation about the next season that is conference play. Listen, it's awesome that UCF was this close to being undefeated, but they're not. That's okay. Whatever ground they need to, air quotes, make up, they can do in the form of some wins in conference play. Now, granted, I know Houston and Memphis are upcoming. That's wildly problematic. Those are tough programs. But games like Wichita State, SMU, The games where they can make their mark and pad themselves as much as possible to be a force in the conference tournament will be a very interesting conversation. And maybe it's air quotes only to the NIT, but when you're playing in a conference like the American that's just as good, when you're looking to build a one that's even better in basketball in the Big 12, that wouldn't be a bad thing to have happen. Tonight is step one.
Awesome. Do you have any final thoughts for Night Nation on the Military Bowl and what it says for the program going forward? What it needs to do, or just how do you think that this fans should respond to this?
Well, listen, at this point, you're looking to the future. Think about the fact you're in the Power Five. Coach Malzahn, well, not just Coach Malzahn, basically every coach that I've talked to, be it Coach Malzahn, Coach Dawkins, or Coach Mesa, have all said that just talking about, hey, we're actually in the Big 12. Even for basketball, where the Power Five doesn't matter, it matters. I don't know. But the punchline is this, my guys. Recruiting has been a fantastic thing for all of them since then. Gus has already done historical stuff in the early signing period, have one of the strongest high school, direct from high school freshman recruits, right? Non-transfers, I'll say, that UCF has arguably seen in its history. They've got a whole lot of stuff going on with that. And the question I will answer that I saw in the comments, I forgot who left the comment, but you could follow up, Bryson, if you'd like. Somebody asked if JRP will be fighting for his starting job, or will Gus bring someone in? Maybe he's eyeing the portal. The answer is yes. In a world where Gus 313, the portal giveth and the portal taketh away, is a thing, you better recognize every coach is always looking at the portal for the next quarterback unless they already have it. I don't think Gus even thinks he does. He might find somebody else who fits the bill better. If he was that willing to do it with Mikey Keene after what he had accomplished in the Gasparilla beating Florida, who's to say he won't do the same for John Rice Plumlee, especially after having lost to Duke in the Military Bowl, especially going to the Power Five? It's a very interesting question to broach. And yeah, I think it will be open competition next year. That I will say as well. And just like you, Bryson, I will be looking forward to the naming of the next offensive coordinator. But gentlemen, an honor, joy, and privilege. Until next time, class dismissed.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you so much for joining us. You are here on Night Shift as back now with Bryson Turner and Andrew Glukov as we wrap up our discussion of the Military Bowl where UCF fell to Duke 30-13. We're probably going to go here, I think, for at the most another half an hour, because I'm sure you guys would like to see UCF athletics maybe end the day on a higher note as the UCF men's basketball team takes on Wichita State, which is what Kyle needed to go and finish his final preparations for. But Drew, what I actually found it really hilarious that he mentioned, because right when he said Big 12, his audio cut off for a second there.
Yeah,
that's the reason I was laughing, because those like unnecessary bleeps that you see in videos sometimes. That was like the perfect. I couldn't believe the timing worked out perfectly for that. But I want to go because you mentioned. Because he mentioned that you look through the portal for the next QB, and I've been seeing some discussion on this. And Michael on Twitter, and Michael McGuckin had a comment on this where he says Grayson McCall should be top priority for the next few weeks. So, what do you think about the prospect of UCF going after Grayson McCall in the portal?
Well, I don't think the chance is very high at all, because he can do better. There's better places for Grayson McCall, better fits, better prestigious programs. I don't think he's going to hit the portal very hard. I mean, look how many quarterbacks he already has in the room. You have Risk as your new quarterback. You have Castellanos as a redshirt freshman. Then you have Timmy McClain. You have John Rice Plumlee. You have a full quarterback room. I mean, you may take a walk-on, but you're not going to really go hit the portal at this point. There's enough on the roster at this point that you're who's going to actually take you up on it. They know what they're walking into. They're walking in a very full room with an incumbent. It's a different situation than what Mikey Keene's doing in Fresno State, where he's walking to a full room that has an open competition. The competition is not as open here as it would be at another school. So I don't think they're going to go after Grayson McCall much at all, because I think there's really no chance of him coming here.
Speaking of quarterbacks, we're now starting to get some videos from the post-game presser, which which almost did not happen, I think, at least on UCF's end, thanks to Southwest Airlines for delaying people's arrival. I'm almost glad that we didn't have anybody plan going to that game, because I couldn't imagine Kyle being stuck in an airport somewhere as the Southwest airline system just absolutely implodes. So right now we have some videos coming in from the press conference from Jason Beatty of the Orlando Sentinel. We actually have some video from John Rice Plumlee responding to his play in the Military Bowl. So let's go ahead and go to that video right now.
John Rice, how would you evaluate your play today?
I'm gonna. We struggled as an offense, and when you struggle as an offense, a lot of the part of playing quarterback, you get a lot of the blame and a lot of the praise as well. But I think tonight, I think there's no other way else to put it, but just not good enough.
Isaiah, what's going through your mind?
So it looks like that John Rice Plumlee seems to be cognizant of the fact that while perhaps it might be as deserved, that he is cognizant of the fact that he's probably going to get a lot of the blame from this. I feel bad for the guy. I really do, because I'm a student at UCF, and so I obviously have my classes around campus, and I've seen John Rice on campus, and he's the nicest guy. I mean, from press conferences and from meeting him on campus, it's unfortunate that, I guess, that he's living his dream of being able to do two sports, but unfortunately you have times like this where you come up short, and you just kind of have to take the blame like that, and you can kind of see him kind of acknowledging that here.
Well, I mean, let's be honest. Because of the degrees of separation, there are people out there that don't necessarily see these players as what they are, which are 18 to 22-year-old kids. They're still learning life, and I remember Mike Gundy, coach of Oklahoma State, getting mad about a very critical newspaper article about his starting quarterback, and he goes, if you want to say something, you talk about me. Don't go after this kid. I'm a man. I'm 40. And go look it up, which is ironically because I am 40. So I mean, boom, there we go. But I mean, the truth is, these are young adults, and they still are going to school. They're still learning about life and trying to get to that next stage of their life. And because of separation, as fans and stuff, we sometimes lose track of that. These are not professional athletes in the aspect of like the NFL. Sure, some of them make money through NIL, but let's be honest, they don't sign the same type of contract with an NFL team. They're not mid-20s to 30s who are a little more battle-toughened to deal with some of this stuff. There are people online who will send hateful stuff to players. I'm not saying UCF fans, but in general, we've seen articles about it where fans from Team A will send hateful stuff to a player who they feel lost in the big game. And these are people. These are human beings, and we should treat each other with a little more respect than that. They're here because they want to play the game, and the school wants them to be here to play the game. The least we can do is be respectful of the fact that they're at least a human being. Some people just don't see it that way, and it's too bad.
You mentioned that you go in that Mike Gundy quote. I know what you're talking about. That I've seen that in some YouTube videos before, but let's kind of do that a little bit. We have a video from Jason Beatty of Coach Malzahn responding. He mentions in the tweet that he asked Malzahn about what happened on the third quarter drive where the Knights began at the 32-yard line, but were unable to score. Before we hear, so let's go ahead and hear Gus Malzahn's that, because that's actually something that I did want to highlight really quickly, because I distinctly remember that drive and the feelings afterwards. So let's go ahead and go to Gus Malzahn after the Military Bowl loss to Duke.
What happened on that drive? You guys took over at the Duke 32-yard line, wasn't able to convert on 4th and 2. What kind of happened there?
The very first drive, pretty disappointing. We turned the guy loose to the field, a free runner. And then, of course, I think we got 1 yard or no yards right there. But that was a key drive. I mean, obviously, we had the momentum. Defense held them against the wind. We got a short punt. And we got a score right there. We didn't get it done there.
But you guys were able to go back on that 91-yard drive and score. I mean, how would you sum up the offensive play today? Kind of up and down.
There's no doubt. We didn't play good enough offensively to give ourselves a chance to win.
What happened on that drive?
So, yeah, I mean, he said it in his tweet, it was inconsistent. I mean, you have that 91 yards touchdown that you have, but then when I saw that Duke punt, which I can honestly say was kind of botched a bit, and UCF started at 32-yard line, I remember saying in the Banneret group chat, I'm like, all right, this should be a layup. You better score here.
Problem is, you said something.
No.
You were the jinx.
No, yeah, don't go doing that. Look, so what about you? I mean, you got to score there, and we didn't get it done. But what about you? I mean, like, you get on that 32 yards. Feels like you should get a layup on that, but you didn't do it. What's your response to what Gus Malzahn had to say there?
Well, I mean, the truth is, when you have an opportunity like that, especially when you're down, you have to get something out of it, just anything. The fact that they got nothing, that's a gut punch. Because remember, it's all about, you got to establish momentum. And the neutral field, you have the opportunity to break the momentum going one way and shift it the other way, as opposed to a road game, which is way more difficult. But all the momentum was originally on Duke's side. You had this lucky break. First you had 60-yard punt, bowl record, go one way, and then you had this dud go the other way. That should have been a chance to turn the tide on the game, and they failed to do so. And I think that's where the game really ended. You have that one moment that was just, as you said, it should have been a layup. But the fact they got 0 out of it, even 3 points would have been something. But I mean, when you have a short field like that, you've got to get a touchdown.
Yep.
But they couldn't get out of their own way. And yeah, the only consistent thing out of this game was that it was inconsistently consistent.
Would it be consistently inconsistent?
Maybe.
I think that it's so funny. I mean, I think I mentioned this earlier on in the show, but this team, I think through this entire season has almost been kind of like the don't give me hope in the sense that, or in that Godfather 3 moment, like, just the moment that I'm out, you pull me back in, because just when you think that this team is taking the downturn, all of a sudden they do something like the trickeration play and go 91 yards to the touchdown. It's like, yes, we're turning it around, and then we don't. I mean, and then this season where you beat Cincinnati, you beat SMU, like, oh my gosh, we're beating teams that were like projected at the top of the conference, and then you lose to ECU and Navy, and oh no. So I mean, I think I mentioned it also on the podcast that wasted potential seems like a theme of this season, because while it's not a disappointment by any means, I mean it's not. I don't think it's not a horrible year. You certainly leave some things on the table, right?
Well, sure. I mean, this was not a bad team. They just had some issues with injuries. They had consistency problems, and they had some talent gaps that flared up from time to time, depending on who they were matched up against. And I know there's a lot of questions about what really happened with that East Carolina game. But you play to win the game, and that was one of those times where momentum just went against you, and you're playing in a hostile environment. This is one reason why UCF wins so often at home, is you have a hostile crowd that can disrupt momentum that goes to the other team, and they've been able to do that really well. And you went to East Carolina and up in North Carolina, they also have a very tough environment. UCF just wasn't ready for that kind of game. They didn't play out of state during out of conference. They had a very soft away game ahead of time. It's within the state of Florida. It probably was a home game. I mean, that's not how you plan for the conference schedule. And the fact that their first true road test was at the toughest home away environment they would see all year didn't help at all. So, I mean, I think things will improve for next year from that standpoint. You're going to Boise State to start off the season. You're going to get that road test early, and then you can settle back and work towards that conference schedule. I think schedule matters, and while everyone wants to have all their home game, the out of conference games at home, there is value in having away games, and more so away games that are not within a 2 or 3 hour drive from your stadium. You want to have that test. You need to have that test. And if you don't have that test, it's going to bite you somewhere else. This team or this program, UCF, much like other programs of its level, is not talented enough where they can do something like an Alabama or Ohio State, where they can play all their out of conference games at home that they choose to, and then go out and just beat up someone. They're not good enough for that. So they need that ability to get that road test out of the way, figure out what works, what doesn't. And then when it matters, which is conference schedule, that's when it matters, really matters. They're ready.
You mentioned that hostile environment that's created here at home, but also you have, you mentioned that the team is probably going to be around 7 wins next year. So I want to pose at least ask about this. How big do you think that these next few years are going to be in terms of, people staying the course? Because the hostile environment seems to be a big factor to you, but if the team is gonna have some stumbling blocks as it integrates into the Big 12, and obviously you have some people that are going to be the criticism of that. There's a tweet from @CFB Knights that I think kind of summarizes this really well. He said, UCF has a very bright future, but the next 2 to 3 years might be really hard on us. Going to be very tough to win a lot of games, and it seems there needs to be a lot of serious changes made. Get ready for criticism because all the haters are going to come to blank on us.
Well, the haters are going to be more internal than external. The external ones are actually expecting UCF to have some growing pains out of the gate, which is a very realistic expectation. I think it's more of an internal issue. You're going to have to keep your fan base engaged. Florida as a state, as a whole state, is very fickle when it comes to sports because there's so many other things to do. If you don't have a winning team, you tend to look elsewhere. You see it in the pro sports all the time, outside of the Tampa Bay Rays, who can't draw flies no matter how bad they try because of where the stadium's located. Most other programs, when they're struggling, their turnout takes a hit. I mean, even the Florida Gators, when they were going through their rough stuff, they weren't selling out anymore. Even in an old program like that is not immune to having this I say fickleness of their fan base. Very common in the state of Florida. You're not happy. Boom, there's a beach pretty much within an hour drive from pretty much anywhere. So you want to go, okay, there's plenty of other things to do. We live in a really dynamic state where certain times of year there's hunting, there's fishing, there's all sorts of stuff going on. There's theme parks. So you want to support and put your money towards a sports program, you're going to want them to win. And you're going to have to understand winning is a lot tougher at that level. It's easier to win 10 wins in a group of 5 conference than it is, year in and year out, than it is in a Power 5 conference. So yeah, 7, 6, 7 wins, is going to be, a normal season on the low end when things really get rolling. I mean, right now, I think that's the high end, until, UCF can fill those talent gaps. But I think the worst criticism is going to come from within the fan base. Some are not going to understand that. Yeah, 6 wins is the thing. Oklahoma State, can go from 9 wins down to 6 wins very quickly. And they're supposed to be one of the better programs in the Big 12. What's that say about UCF's chances? They could easily go from 8 wins to 4 wins. I mean, it can happen, and sometimes the difference between a win and a loss is a single bounce. That happened, within UCF's 25-game win streak. So, I mean, they're going to have some thick skin. They're going to have to deal with the outside noise. Because it's coming, and it's actually already here. It's just people aren't listening to it, and they're going to have to kind of accept reality that there's serious things that have to be decided. No. What's serious is the fans' expectation is going to have to become a lot more realistic. It's not realistic, and you talk about CFB Knights. He's a young guy, so I mean his perspective is a little less worldly in that fashion. We've seen what the doldrums of Division I can be, and we've seen what the top of it can be, but we never really sat at the adult table. Well, you hit 13, you have your bar mitzvah, you go sit at the adult table. You're still young, and it's going to take time to grow into it. Just saddle up, be ready to take some lumps. They'll get there. Follow the TCU model.
It's funny because I feel like that UCF has always had their lumps, taken their lumps before some of their finest hours. Because you have the winless season of George O'Leary's first year, then you get the on-campus stadium a little later. Then you have 13, and 13 kind of is the pinnacle of that. Then you go down and you have the winless season of 2015, and then you have 2017 and 2018, all that. And now we're kind of on that kind of, and now I think the way that I'm seeing this is we're now going to have, at least on the seasonal perspective, we're now back into a small fish scenario. Because over these past few years, I think this program has really grown into a big fish in a small pond. And now that we have the opportunity to be in the big pond, the issue is that we're technically going to be a small fish again. And hey, as someone that, look, I didn't start attending UCF games until 2013, until 2012-ish. I didn't even move to Orlando until around then. Heck, when I was a little kid and stupid, I lived in Tampa, and I was a USF fan because my dad worked there. All right, so that's how much I knew at young. But what I'm trying to say is that even one thing I've really learned doing these night shift with you guys this season, and I also kind of learned it from sitting down and interviewing with and talking with my former UCF head coach, Mike Kruzik, which is going to be going up on a podcast feed soon. So be on the lookout for that. But is that this team has come a long way from where they've begun, and there's been a lot worse that this program has been to. This transition into the Big 12 is only the beginning for the next chapter in UCF's history. I look at this, because I look at this, and we didn't even get into the MAC until what? You said 2002 was, I think, the first season in the MAC, right?
Right.
I was born already at that point, and I was less than a year old when UCF first started playing in the MAC, and they have changed.
Old.
And they have changed multiple conferences since then, from the MAC to CUSA to the American, and now to the Big 12. And it feels like it's a whole life has happened since then. To go from then to here is a major accomplishment in and of itself. And now I think that this is more of a maturation process that I think we're seeing. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's part of a power program.
Well, yeah, it's part of the growth. I remember, playing that last year as an independent. That was my first year at UCF in 2001. They had a winning season, but I mean, it was, nothing impressive. There was, finishing 6-5. There was no postseason. They finished 7-5 in 2002. There was no postseason. At that time, only the top 2 teams in the MAC got bowl games. I mean, it was a very different world. Now you're 6-6. You go to bowl game. In fact, you may actually get it 5-7 if you have a good enough APR score. Very different world we live in. And while that doesn't mean what happened then means anything now, it's important to understand the growth, the process, and that it's a walk up a mountain. It takes a long time, takes a lot of effort. You're going to stumble, but you're going to get there. You just have to have the vision, and you have to have the support to do it. And they have stumbled a lot. I was there through the whole 0-17 streak. I was at every one of those home games, and it sucked. It was terrible. That 0-15, that 0-12 team in 2015 definitely stung a lot less than sitting through that 17-game losing streak. Only the fact that this team actually had some talent behind it. There was nothing on that 2004 squad because of how barren the cupboard was. But you're going to have drops like that. College sports is cyclical. You're going to have rises, you're going to have falls, but you got to have the vision to climb the mountain. UCF is hitting a new checkpoint in the new conference affiliation. They got to keep climbing the mountain. Now the slope gets even higher. It's harder. You want to play with the big boys? It's harder to play with the big boys. This is what you signed on for. However, with that comes the reward, the better financing, which then leads to better facilities, which can attract better players that can then keep you competitive. So, I mean, it's a process. We're going to have to be patient because, UCF doesn't have great facilities. UCF needs to work on taking care of their staff. There is no magic easy button to fix it all. It's going to take time. It's going to take resources, and they don't have it yet, but they will. So I just think we need to all be ready to see the team, in this sport and in other sports, take a beating. They're going to get knocked down. They're going to get knocked down a lot. But that's where the fan support needs to be there to help pick this this athletic program back up. Just because they're going to have bad seasons, and they're going to have bad seasons in there, it doesn't mean I'm going to like them any less. I can't speak for everyone else, but that's not going to stop me.
Right.
But we just have to be, we have to be cognizant of the fact that this is not a click, of our heels, and all of a sudden everything's puppies and rainbows. It's going to be a climb.
Yeah, I misspoke earlier when I said that was less than a year when the UCF joined the MAC. I was a year and a half. I was going to say that when UCF joined the MAC in 2002. But you mentioned that mountain climb. I just want to make sure because I misspoke there. But you mentioned that mountain climbing metaphor, and that reminds me of a documentary that I watched about Mount Everest and kind of what it takes to climb it, which all the way through is a major difficulty in and of itself. But you have that last bit right before you get to the summit, which I remember distinctly. It's called the death zone, which is the toughest of them all because of how thin the air is up there. And I feel like that's sort of like emblematic of where UCF is getting to now. We've climbed that mountain a long way because it takes a long time to get up there. And now you've reached the quote unquote death zone where it's the hardest of it all. And obviously it's not going to be as, as critical or anything like that. But it's more about the difficulty of it, because now you're in the Power Five, and sure sure Kansas and Vanderbilt are there, and we all love to poke fun at them. But even so, they've had their good years. Even though people say, "Oh, they don't deserve to be in the Power Five," but they're in the Power Five. We are there now. We are going to be there, and now it's about taking advantage of that time as that time accumulates, and letting that cycle work its way up and improving ourselves along the way. And we've seen what Lance Leipold has done with that Kansas franchise, because it looks like that program has direction now. I mean, at first I remember when I heard the announcement that UCF was going to the Big 12, I'm thinking like, oh, that's nice. We'll at least get a conference win against Kansas every year. Yeah, no, I don't think that anymore now. And so I think, yeah, and you really hit the nail on the head there, where it's going to be a climb, but now, and this may be a kind of a disappointing end to the time in the American, but now we have a new adventure waiting for us, and this is sort of getting ready to go on that new adventure.
Absolutely. Not only when you talk about climbing a mountain, and you mentioned Everest, a lot of it's timing, luck, and UCF fell into that too. There was a lot of timing and luck that came with it. If certain small pieces moved a little bit different, the Big Ten expansion happened at a different time, UCF never would have gotten into the Big 12. So there's luck to that. There's bad luck too that worked against UCF during their rise. So sometimes all it takes is one lucky bounce to make it happen. We've seen it. We saw that 25 game winning streak. It had some lucky bounces, and then we saw what happens when the luck runs out in subsequent years. So sometimes it is better to be lucky than good. But again, as I said before, it's all part of the maturization, the maturing process of the school. It's a young school. It's a young and hungry fan base. They've had to deal with the little sibling syndrome to the big three in Florida for a very long time. And now they're finally climbed up to a point where they can compete on a level with those schools. And you saw it on the field last year, and now you're going to start seeing it more with comparable wins against other Power 5 schools. So I mean, there's a real opportunity that aside from UCF as a school being a big school, which means a growing alumni base, you can develop quite a support system. It's a marathon. It's a very long marathon. And, this is just the beginning. So, hold on tight and don't let go, because it's going to be a fun ride going forward.
I mean, look, some football programs, started their football programs right near the top. I remember when Charlotte, I think, first started theirs. I think they started right up there, immediately, I think, in D1. UCF is the only program that has gone from D3 and make that slog of a climb through the different divisions to get to where we are right now. If anything, even if a younger program even a younger program than us, goes and wins a national title or something like that, I feel like that any success that we see at once we get it into the Big 12 era, and any success we get here now, is all the sweeter because of the slog that they've had to go through since this program has begun to get to that point in the first place. Jessica Sheldon said it herself, I'm with this team all the way.
Yeah, and as you were saying about the D3 to FBS, there's other schools that have had similar tracks, not quite the same track. Like they've gone from NEIA, they've started with club, maybe they skipped a spot. Like I remember UAB skipped Division II based on some sort of classification on their size. There's been a number of schools, but take all those schools and compare them to UCF. UCF has bucked a trend. Normally these schools that are in the Power 5, they're all very old. They've been around a long time. I think Houston may be one of the youngest in the 1920s. UCF's a school that started in the 60s. The football program started in 79. I mean, that's a very young program. They don't usually follow this track. It's a combination being in the right place at the right time with various aspects of the athletic and academic levels of the school, all just being in the right place at the right time. And as we know, and there's been studies to prove it, a good athletic program is a valuable component in improving the academic stature of a school. They get more applications. They get better quality applications. It's one reason why UAB brought football back. The studies are out there and prove that there's value in having a good athletics program, which is why UCF has invested so much in it. It should be probably sooner rather than later that they'll start to not so much pull out of, get investment out of it for the school itself, but I think you'll have some sort of dividend coming back to the school as far as more on the academic side as well. So one does feed into the other. But because UCF's so young, it looks disproportionately small and weak compared to some of these other schools that have been around for a century plus. So it's going to take time. Again, going to take time. It's a very long process. Just buckle up. And yeah, I'm with this team all the way. Yeah, I'm with this team all the way too. I'm expecting bumps in the road, highs and lows. We all need to. And not let that get in the way of the prize at the end of the road.
Yeah. Florida State, by the way, first played in 1947. They were the youngest Power 5 team before UCF did, and 1979. That's a big jump right there. Fast Luck Style says, "Thank you for the regular therapy session." You're welcome. This is sort of a therapy session, not only for you guys, but also a little bit for ourselves. I'm sure a little bit for ourselves. Drew mentioned earlier he's been through all these things. I'm sure he's used to it by now.
I've been to the Hawaii Bowl. I sat through that.
yeah. People like me, like this is new for me. And for being a UCF fan, I mean, sure, I went through that one winless season, but that was just like, kind of a brief blip.
That was a blip.
Right. And now we're going through a period where it's probably going to be a little bit of a longer slog. I mean, I'm sure Brandon and Jason and BD are probably going to need a therapy session after the Southwest fiasco, which by the way, our well wishes go out to Pete, to UCF fans who were trying to get to DC, but absolutely had their airlines failed them. It was so cold this Christmas. It was insane.
We got lucky here.
Oh yeah. Mr. Andrew 913 says, exactly. We have to look back at how far we've come and be thankful for the growth as we move forward, even as we complain. Yes, we complain. We complain because we care. And at least those that do it in good spirit.
Well, remember, the opposite of love isn't hate; it's apathy.
Yes.
If we didn't care, the team could be 4-8, and no one would blink an eye.
Yes, indeed. So, and with that, I mean, that brings the 2022 UCF football season to a close. I mean, maybe we had left some things on the table, but in the end, I think it's
a 9-win season. I mean, here's the truth.
We're going to the Big 12. I mean, you can't take that away.
Big 12. And the one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to create a Frank Solich moment where you're doing okay, you're going through a spell, you're doing okay, and you make a change because doing okay isn't okay enough. I'm always concerned about UCF having a Frank Solich moment because Nebraska has not recovered since. They had a couple of seasons here and there, but they have not recovered since. They fired a guy for having a 9-win season. Ouch.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, that is true. I remember the Atlanta Falcons fired Mike Smith, even though he was doing pretty solidly. And you look, and I mean, sure, that they went to the Super Bowl and got 23, but then look what happened.
Yeah, when you make a hard change like that, and this is you see this with on the basketball side with Johnny Dawkins. If you take a guy who's I'll kick, doing better than the support that he's getting, because as we know, UCF basketball does not get much support from the school, and that's going to change once they get to the Big 12. you get rid of a coach, it's not some magical antidote to the program. You have to bring someone in, and if you kick out a guy who's well liked and hadn't really done things wrong, people are going to think twice. Like, do I really want to be involved with this? So sometimes you got to be able to justify firing a coach, or else it could come back to bite you.
You are indeed right about that, and as you mentioned basketball. It is now tipped off as UCF men's basketball takes on Wichita State.
Tune in.
Yes, indeed. I just want by the one other thing I did want to mention with this season is we saw some great seasons from Isaiah Bowser, Jason Johnson. I mean, John Rice Plumlee certainly provided some nice highlights for sure this year, even if the consistency wasn't exactly all the way there. Sam Jackson, of course, got to anchor the O-line one more time. Alex Ward had another shot at the Patrick Manley Award, but of course he was a bridesmaid yet again. But best of luck to him in the NFL. And of course, Devon Wilson is going to have his shot at the NFL as well. And we'll see what happens with Kobe Perry. But unless the NCAA grants him another year of eligibility, he will be gone as well. And he went all out on a game where he really showed what he was made of, I think, in terms of his passion and aggression on the football field. For all those, to see all those guys go, it's sad for them to go out like this, but in the end, I think that they provided us with some great memories, I think, for this season. I've treasured covering them this entire season with you, Drew, with Kyle, and with Eric, who are both busy covering the basketball game. And, of course, with you guys. So thank you guys so much for –
And you got in the press box this year more than once.
Yes.
You're welcome.
That was really – yes, indeed. I remember that I actually took a photo with a couple of other fellow UCF Nicholson school people in the press box and sent it to my sports reporting professor that I had in the fall of 2020, and he responded with, "You made me very proud." So it was amazing to be there. It was I hope I get to be able to go to the press box with you at some point in the future, because those two games are with Kyle. So it would be awesome to experience.
You're gonna have to talk to Kyle on that one. I was willing to give up my seat just because it's a long multi-hour drive, and but him, it's less than 20 minutes, so you're gonna have to bribe him. He is bribable.
That's true. But great memories. I mean, we got through a hurricane. We beat SMU with a great game. I mean, beating Cincinnati was great, and through all the ups and downs, I mean, we got to all spend time together as a fan base, whether it's through these night shifts or whoever, people that went through the game. We got through of course, those moments where we lost some members of the UCF community, as well as Jay Heskog, rest in peace to all of them. Lynn, James, Cossack advisor, all of them. And, we got through all these things together. And I think that as we go through the Big 12, we're still going to do that. And and that's not going to change anything. And it's been amazing covering this season with you, Drew, and to kind of have these times with you and everybody and everyone watching the stream right now.
Well, I've always said that sports and music are two of the things that bring people together from different walks through life. You look at 9/11 when that happened. One of the big things that happened was sporting events afterwards, and it brought people together. You go to a New York Yankees game, and you have people different colors, creeds, languages. They all come together under a banner, which was the sports team. It's no different than UCF. UCF brings in people from different colors, creeds, languages. They come together to watch, the school that they love. And with the benefit of social media, especially on, between Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram and stuff, and some of the other services on like Discord that have grown, you have allowed these fans to connect with each other and create a fan family, not just I go to the game, but I go to the game and now I have friends who also feel similarly about a sporting team. So I've always used sports as a way to bring people together. I always use the example of this one ESPN commercial that's got two people making out. One's wearing an Ohio State shirt, one's wearing a Michigan shirt. And it says, without sports, this wouldn't be disgusting. And I think it's an absolute perfect example of sports has such an impact on our lives. I mean, look at us. We've talked for over an hour and a half about a football game that happened hundreds and hundreds of miles away. It just happens to have a school that we're connected to. And we have a huge age gap between us of when we went to school there. But you know what? UCF and the sports brings us together to do it, and it does it on a large scale. So I'm glad that, you know, we're all part of the UCF family. And that's one of the things that's going to help build towards, you know, success in the Big 12 is that support. You know, because they're you know, there's going to be times where people are like, you know what, I spend all this money and they're just not doing what I want. And you know what, there's going to be others who are with them and say, you know what, it's not so bad. And, you know, keep them on, keep the faith, that, you know, something that they're passionate about, that they pour their hearts and their wallets into will eventually pay dividends to them and give them a product that they can be proud of. So, you know, I'm happy everyone who's joined us for the ride, and we'll see you guys for our next sport, which is going on right now. Yeah. Kyle Nash at the UCF basketball game. But for all those who only follow football, we'll see you next year as spring ball picks up.
Yes, indeed. I'll tell you what, sports will never be important as music or any other art. My rear. I remember seeing that tweet making the rounds, and you really summed it all up right there. So yes, but yes, men's basketball game is now underway against Wichita State on ESPN, probably on the ESPN app. I can't remember which ESPN channel it was, whether it's Plus or U or whatever, but whatever you can get it, go watch it. It's right there. Enjoy the game. And Drew, thank you so much for talking with me about this today. Where can the people find you, and what do you have coming up?
Well, I'll have my knee-jerk reactions up some point tonight, but you can catch me at StatBoyDrew on Twitter. And you know, right, wrong, or indifferent, I'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. And you can find Kyle at the SOTG. You can find me at It's Bryson Turner. Make sure you subscribe to the Black and Gold Banneret YouTube channel so you can be notified if we go live with Night Shift again, because we do have Night Shift for non-football events if they're big enough. We had one last year after the basketball team beat Michigan. So by subscribing, you will be notified when we have those night shifts, because now we have to count down the days till the next UCF football game in 2023 when we're going to be in the Big 12. I can't wait, Drew. So
looking forward to it. Let's do it.
Yep. So for Drew, Kyle, and for the entire Black and Gold Banneret crew, thank you guys so much for spending your time with us. Enjoy the UCF men's basketball game, and we will see you when we see you. Be sure to also be ready for the Black and Gold Banneret podcast. We'll have that out sometime in the near future that also discusses this game with Jeff Sharon and Eric Lopez. And so have fun watching the basketball game. Be on the lookout for that. My name is Bryson and Turner, and for Eric Lopez, have a nice day. Go Knights. Charge on.